Hello, I'm Emily Rhodes, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about The Bottle Factory Outing by Beryl Bainbridge. I should begin this by saying it's actually very early in the morning. I'm about to go away for my Easter break, and I suddenly realised last night that I've read this book, so I wasn't planning on taking it with me. So I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to be able to do this video recording while I'm away without the book? So before I catch the Eurostar, I got up to record a quick thing to you now. Tell you a little bit about this first. So it's set in 1970s Camden Town, and it's a very eccentric book, and I think it's quite a kind of class-driven book. It's very funny. It's very dark and quite troubling. Um, it. What else can I say about it? It's this strange kind of thing of. I think it was on the BBC A Good Read when they said this. I thought it was such a good way of putting it. Um, it becomes a little bit of a whodunit, but to start with, there's more of a who's going to do it. You know, you sort of know something bad is going to happen, but you can't totally see what and how. So there's this brilliant feeling of suspense for most of the book, I think. Um, yeah, very menacing. Um, it's basically about Brenda and Frida, who we think are two friends, but in fact aren't. And in fact, I'm going to read a little bit out that tells you a little bit about how they met and the nature of the relationship. But they are, I suppose, flatmates. They're living in a bedsit, and they're working in a bottle factory outing, which of course is a job that Beryl Bainbridge herself did have for a while. She very much drew on her own experience here in the cold kind of working conditions. And they not only share a bedsit, they share a bed, and she describes this kind of barrier of books down the middle of the bed for, so they don't touch each other in the night, which feels like quite an extraordinary image. But there's, in some ways, these two women getting up, going to work, their sort of hopes and failures in love, and the sort of a few days in the life of, and this is about a particular outing that they organise for all the Italians who are working with them in the bottle factory. But there's something, well, I suppose the word is kind of deluded about this book. They have, particularly Frida has these delusions of grandeur. She's an actor, not a particularly successful one, sadly. But she sort of sweeps around. She's always got amazing clothes and makeup on, and her sort of high point in the book comes shortly before her literally low point, where she rides this horse through Windsor Great Park, and it's almost like a fairy tale, and you feel that actually, in some ways, this is her version of her story. She is living in a world of romance, and this kind of completely other narrative is what she wants to inhabit of a fairy tale, whereas actually she's having to live with this reality of sharing a bedsit, working in a bottle factory outing, not having any money or much work. I'm really intrigued to see what you think about it. I think possibly the humour isn't for everyone, but there is a real darkness and threat there that kind of balances it out in a slightly uncomfortable way. I think there's a lot in here about sexual violence, which feels very unsettling to read, and I think Beryl Bainbridge did have quite different views about sexual violence to to the sort of modern views. I think she was much more accepting of it, which you feel in this book, and that does sit quite uncomfortably. But I wanted to read this little bit out about how they met, partly because there's a little bit of an Easterish theme. Sorry, you can hear my tummy rumbling. I haven't had breakfast yet. So this is right at the beginning of the book. Okay. When they had first met in the butcher's shop on the Finchley Road, it had been Brenda's lack of control, her passion, that had been the attraction. Standing directly in front of Frida, she had asked for a pork chop, and the butcher, reaching for his cleaver on the wooden slab, had shouted with familiarity, "Giving the old man a treat, are you?" At which Brenda had begun to weep, moaning that her husband had left her, that there was no old man in her world. She had trembled in a blue faded coat with a damaged fur collar, and let the tears trickle down her face. Frida led her away, leaving the offending cut of meat on the counter, and after a week they found a room together in Hope Street. And Frida learnt it wasn't the husband that had abandoned Brenda, it was she who had left him, because she couldn't stand him coming home drunk every night from the Little Legion and peeing on the front step. Also, she had a mother-in-law who was obviously deranged, who sneaked out at dawn, I can't read this without laughing, to lift the eggs from under the hens and drew little faces on the shells with a biro. What? So there you have it. If you're after a kind of homemade Easter surprise, do go and lift the eggs from under the hens and draw faces on them with a biro. I mean, it's brilliant, this book, because even there in this what seems like just quite a funny anecdote, explaining how they met, their sort of eccentricity, the fact that Brenda maybe has more to her than first meets the eye, that she is the one who's left, that she's taken a stand, that she's got this eccentric mother-in-law. That could really easily just be nothing about the mother-in-law, but the mother-in-law comes back with a bang, literally, in this sort of brilliantly kind of farcical moment. So she is always kind of setting things up, Beryl Bainbridge. And again, even the very first page where there's this description, this very sort of strange description of a funeral and a hearse coming out, and Frida crying, even the Frida was crying, and then the first line of speech is from Brenda. "I don't know why you're crying," said Brenda. "You didn't know her," the dead body. And then Frida says, "I like it, it's so beautiful." Again, this could just be quite a sort of eccentric beginning, but in fact it's setting up quite a key plot point. Then this funeral is used as an excuse when they get to the factory, and then it sort of gets turned into one of their mothers, and this delusion, and it all kind of takes shape really from this seemingly quite innocuous beginning. So yeah, it's a very strange book, and one I really enjoyed reading. Really glad to discover Beryl Bainbridge. As many of you know, I used to work in the bookshop very near the Hampstead one where we meet, and I was talking to someone the other night at dinner who I was telling her I was reading this, and she was saying how much she loved Beryl Bainbridge. She was actually my predecessor in this bookshop. And she said when she worked there, she used to see Beryl Bainbridge all the time, like walking along the streets, because she lived very nearby, and how she'd walk along with her grandchildren. So I don't know, it feels, I suppose I know Camden Town quite well. I've worked around there for so long. It feels like a world, I suppose, sorry, this is a very rambling video. Similarly to the La Roche, Mr. Marr and Son book, which was our previous book, feels like the area, the streets, the London setting is incredibly familiar to me. And the fact that Beryl Bainbridge lived there too, you know, and was seen from the place where I used to work, it feels so kind of close. But yet here is this other world in it that is completely different. Not just the world of Frida and Brenda and their impoverished bedsit, where the loo doesn't work, but also, sorry, I mean, I feel like that row of books could have been bought from the bookshop. But no, but also this Italian world of the contadini who have been rescued from worse poverty on the land in Italy and have been brought by this, you know, Panganotti, this amazing man who started the factory, has been brought to London, to this kind of land of hopes and dreams, and they work together, you know, not really speaking much English, in this very closed community that respects him, Panganotti, more than the police or the sort of English system. It just feels like this other world that exists on the streets that I know, and there's something so uncanny and appealing about that. And of course, it's very true. You know, we all feel we know our area, our homes, our workplaces very well, but of course, there are a million lives going on behind these closed front doors. I noticed in Beryl Bainbridge's Desert Island Discs, she talks about how smartly she and her family dressed when they left the house, and then they'd come home, and as soon as they got through the front door, they basically put on rags. And this idea that, you know, your best clothes were just for the street, just for show. I feel that so strongly in this book. There's this real sense of show and acting and delusion that goes with that. And I suppose to some extent that's true to life still. You know, so often we have no idea what goes on behind the closed doors on our street even today, let alone what might have gone on there 50 odd years ago. Anyway, this is the April book for Emily's Walking Book Club. Please do join me to chat about it. You can find out more on the newsletter, which is on Substack, emily'swalkingbookclub.substack.com. Please join us for a walk in Regent's Park or Hampstead Heath, or for a Zoom on Monday evening. Thank you for joining me. Our next book, which of course now I can't put my hands on, is Owls Do Cry by Janet Frame. Thank you for joining me, and leave me a comment. I'd love to know what you think of the book too.